Ever wanted to draft for the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, the Indigo Disk, but don't know where to start? Well, this is a video for you guys. What's going on, everybody? You have Tone here, back with another episode in the How to Draft in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet series, the Indigo Disk. While throughout the first 6 episodes of this series, I have tried my best to educate Draft League players, both new and continuing in the Draft League community, on how to draft the best Pokemon, try to draft one of the best teams possible using certain rules that I deviated up and tried to follow, and while contemplating and creating teams around cores that I came up with some suggestions coming from the viewers themselves. While that may be fun on the surface, viewership can kind of dissimulate and decrease over time, since it's basically just becoming a repetitive series of me just doing the exact same thing but with different Pokemon. However, this time around I decided to deviate a bit from the norm this time because there was a little bit of a situation or an opportunity that fell into my lap not too long ago, and I decided to take advantage of that with this series and go in an entirely new direction. What is that direction I decided to go into? The answer is low tier draft. Something that has been pretty much omnipresent in the current Draft League format because of the fact that for the last few months it's pretty much been the standard norm just to do standard draft and go from there. However, if you guys do want to go and look back on the previous episode or the last episode in the series for episode 6, there will be a link in the top right description as always, and of course the playlist will be shown at the end of the video, so feel free to check out the previous episodes if you guys did not miss that. So, what's the concept here behind low tier draft? Basically, it's exactly how you see it. You take standard Draft League format and omit all the strong, hard-hitting Pokemon that definitely gets drafted on teams, no matter who it is. So, you don't have to see no Iron Valiants, no Enamoruses, Iron Treads, Great Tusks, Palafins if your Draft League allows it. The list goes on and on. This is a new Draft League that pretty much gains precedence and allows lower tier Pokemon, or I guess in this case Pokemon that would be mid-round picks in a standard format, to come to the forefront and be more inclusive in your ideas, in your drafts, and in your prep. Basically, it's basically just standard tier draft, while giving lower tier Pokemon the chance to shine where they normally don't do so in a standard league format. What makes low tier drafts so different, aside from all the Pokemon that's going to be omnipresent from this league in general, the nice thing about low tier draft is anything really goes as far as I'm concerned here. Normally, when it comes to putting cores together from a low tier perspective, you're not really thinking of an immediate core right away because there's so many low tier options. Usually mid tier Pokemon that comes up, like say for example Gastrodon, as just to give an example, it's mostly seen as a Gloomon. You're not really thinking of it as an imperative part of your team early on in the draft. Granted, that's not really the best of examples because it's the glue Pokemon, but if you want to go a bit more offensive, let's say something like Gardevoir for example. Gardevoir not really seen much to some people as a high tier fairy, unless you're me, but that's a different story. But regardless, it's now seen more as a top tier threat because Psychic plus Fairy is not only one of the best typings from a low tier perspective, the other boon that comes with that typing is most of the Pokemon that got omitted from standard play that's not allowed here, there are a good amount of steel types that you cannot draft in lower tier format. So you don't have to worry about Goldengos, no Corviknights, Skarmories, Iron Treads, Heatran. So yeah, that's 5 steals I mentioned right there, and Gardevoir has no fear of. So it makes other typings, specifically steals, a lot more omnipresent and a lot more difficult to actually try to get and make sure they fit on your draft, which makes something like Gardevoir a bit more present because you want to have that steel type, but you can't say all steals really fit your team, let alone are viable in a sense to where your draft is just a little bit awkward in a sense. And the one thing you don't want to do in a low tier draft is end up drafting in a sense that makes your team look a bit too clunky and you don't feel comfortable with it at all. However, there will be instances where clunkiness may not be the worst thing in the world, especially considering it's all about experimentation at the end, regardless of whether you know what the heck you're doing or not. I'm not saying I'm a perfectionist myself, I just want to give my own interpretation when it comes to low tier draft, especially considering that not only is this particular episode will be not only going over a team, this is actually going to double as a draft analysis for myself in this new draft league tier, which focuses on low tier. So this will be a new draft league after the UMPL winding down. I jump into a new draft league with low tier format as the name of the game. So this will double not only as a means of helping you get an idea of what to look for when it comes to low tier draft, I'll be breaking down my own team for once and give some ideas as to why I drafted what I did, and at the end of the video you'll see a little bit of not really a precursor, but you'll see I'll have some excess and you'll see what I'm talking about at the end, towards the end of the video. But before that, let's jump right into the rules and roles just for a bit of a refresher. However, there are a few changes that I made to the rules and pertaining to low tier format. So first and foremost, I'm not really going to go too in depth because most of the stuff on this list is already pretty, not really self-explanatory, but I've gone over it so many times in the past that it doesn't really feel right for me to constantly repeat myself over and over again, especially considering I'm confident in you guys' ability to comprehend what I'm talking about. But if you guys want some more in depth, feel free to leave a comment in the description down below. I'll definitely look at it and I'll go a bit further if needed. However, there are a few things I do want to talk about considering what I added. So aside from what you see on your screen, you will see a few two extra things. Well, two extra things that I did add on to this list here. First one is a ghost type, which I talked about in previous episodes, and the main reasoning for the ghost typing is not only for the normal immunity, but mainly is just there to ensure that you have a way of blocking rapid spin. While low tier format, a bunch of rapid spinners are taken out of the ability to draft. So Tusk, Iron Treads, Quaquaval, to list a few examples. You still have other rapid spinners in the tier that you do want to take into account, and you don't want a situation where if you are bringing hazard stack to a game, you don't want your hazards that you work so hard to get up to be spun away so easily. So that's why I have a ghost type here to at the very least dissuade rapid spin as best as possible. And then you look at the one thing above that being a flying resist. Now this is a bit counterintuitive because at the end you see Dragon Steel Fairy Core and you're like, a flying resist? If I get a steel, that's it resists flying, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is this actually. With the Pokemon that were omitted from the list, there are some things that did come to the forefront, especially not even considering Terra as an option, but most of the Pokemon that are now more of a threat when it comes to low tier format just so happens to be flying types. When it comes to flying types in standard format, the main one that comes to mind for most people would be Tornadus. Though I will say in other instances there are other Pokemon that are flying types that don't have or use their flying stab a lot, for example Gliscor and Dragonite unless you're running special, and then there are Pokemon that are flying types but don't have flying stab to go along with it unless they're Terra, example Enamorus and the Thunderuses. And then there's even the other flying type Pokemon that actually use their flying stab, but depends on the situation in the matchup, being Corviknight and Skarmory. So when it comes to flying resist here, there are other flying type Pokemon that are sort of middle of the pack that can actually shine more considering what was taken out. So for example, Moltres, Noivern, Kilowattrel, Hisuian Braviary is another one, Braviary for number 5. But yeah, Talonflame, so stuff like that. So with having a good offensive spam move from a flying type perspective and less Pokemon to worry about resisting their stab, having a flying resist is actually more imperative than you think. Or at the very least, have some sort of flying check that you can easily prevent, that can easily threaten out said flying type Pokemon in the instance that things don't gets too out of hand. Which does make things a little bit more hairy, especially considering while Steel may resist flying, if the flying type Pokemon has coverage to deal with said Steel type, then it's a bit more omnipresent and makes having an additional way of dealing with flying type Pokemon a bit more intuitive and a bit more important to have as you're drafting in your team. But again, normally that doesn't come up that often, but I do like to have at least an additional flying resist, so basically try to get a rock type to go along with your steel. Having both would be a lot better than having just one to deal with flying, because flying type Pokemon, regardless, especially from a low tier perspective, most of them do have coverage to deal with your steel. So having a steel and a rock type just for a bit of extra security is definitely beneficial for your draft. The other thing I do want to talk about before I go into my own draft, is basically the speed tiers. So while it does say 2 speed tiers above base 110, it's a bit tricky to say this in hindsight from a low tier perspective. From a standard perspective, this would make a lot more sense because the basic 110 Pokemon you want to deal with, or have something to be faster than, would be the Lotties. However, they're not in low tier, so you can technically get away with only having one Pokemon base 110 speed or faster. Speed is a little bit tricky to come by, just because the list of Pokemon that are faster than 110 speed or fast in general are either pretty limited or they don't fit your draft depending on what you took already, and you don't want to double up on typings unless you really need to. However, still try to get 2 as long as it makes sense for your draft. That doesn't mean necessarily doubling up on typings just for the sake of it. At least when you do so, make sure you have a purpose behind doing so. You don't want to waste your points. Wasting your points means wasting your pick, and wasting your pick means basically gutting your entire team once the whole draft is over, and I really don't want you guys to be in a situation where that comes to pass. But regardless of the situation, everything else for the most part is pretty self-explanatory and straightforward, considering I've gone through this so many times in the past. So, not let you guys keep wait any longer, let's go into the draft itself. So, how the draft works here for the low tier mayhem, the LTM. So shoutouts to OG Albina, Obo, and Panther for inviting me to be a part of this draft itself. So how this draft works here is we have a full slate of 16 coaches drafting through the draft pool. Each coach is given 110 points to draft between 9 and 11 Pokemon. And during the draft or at the end of the draft, you can declare one of those Pokemon to be a Terra Captain. On top of that, your Terra Captain is free Terra, so you can basically terrestrialize your Terra Captain into anything you want. Any typing, no restrictions, anything goes. The only thing is, afterwards or before battling, you have to let your opponent know what your Terra Captain's Terra type will be, basically to mimic what Showdown does with free Terra preview on Showdown. So with that being said, let's jump right into my draft. So, out of 16 coaches, I was stuck with the 10th pick in the draft, which is towards the middle, which sucks. It's probably one of the worst positions to be in from a draft perspective. But regardless, the main thing I went into this draft with the mindset of was the key word for me is always going to be value. While it may be nice to take the best Pokemon available, I'm not really one for taking the best Pokemon available if it means that I'm stuck with just a one-trick pony. Or, for the instance, a Pokemon that does one particular thing good and not much else. I'm not really in a situation where I want to limit myself from a building perspective. And with that being said, my first round pick is a little bit of a iffy one for round 1, considering that the highest pick from a value standpoint is 16 points. But truth be told, Pokemon value 16 to 14 could not Terra. And to be honest, when it came to my pick, I didn't really feel comfortable with any of the picks that were left over. So instead, I went value over best Pokemon available at this point. And while it may be a weird round 1 pick for most people, I felt it was a bit more justified in my sense, because like I said, I valued value over anything else. So with my round 1 pick, I ended up snagging up Swampert. So like I said, really iffy pick for a round 1. It doesn't really scream round 1. But considering my value and versatility with Swampert, it's actually really doggone good. I immediately fill out a bunch of roles with my team. Stealth Rocker, Bulky Water, Electric Immunity, can be ran physically defensive, specially defensive, Assault Vest, Choice Band, Choice Scarf, Momentum with Flip Turn, Knockoff Support, and on top of that, it can technically do Setup Move with Bulk Up. So right there, that's about 7 or 8 things I listed right there on Swampert, just from that pick alone. And while it may seem weird to get Swampert round number 1, probably could have gotten something better with the pick, but regardless, versatility will always gain precedence, in my opinion, as opposed to just getting something that's just hit hard, hit fast, or whatever. I get my versatility, I get a bunch of value with Swampert here, and for the most part, it's just going to be a good bulky Pokemon for me with a lot of versatility behind it, between rocks, between defensive, between bulk up, between choice guard, between choice band, assault vest. The list goes on, and that's what I like the most with Swampert. It gives me versatility, it makes it easier for the rest of my team to be a bit more flexible in that sense, and Swampert itself is flexible itself with its bulk and good offensive presence. So that's my round 1 pick in Swampert. The other nice thing about Swampert, aside from all the things I mentioned, it only comes with one weakness, being Grass. Grass is probably like one of the easiest typings to cover for your team, regardless on how you draft. It just happens to be there. So with that in mind, I decided to cover up that Grass weakness immediately by pairing it with pretty much one of the best Pokemon available that I felt at that time for round 2, and that's Moltres. So yeah, pretty good offensive or balanced core here between Swampert and Moltres. Moltres, of course, is a good, fantastic Pokemon, being fire and flying type, covering the grass type Pokemon. For Swampert, in return, Swampert covers the rock and ground type Pokemon that can threaten Moltres. It gives me momentum with U-turn. It's a hard-hitting special attacker with 125 special attack, 90 speed is respectable, and of course, Flame Body is never a bad ability to have to cripple physical attackers that don't like to get burnt. In hindsight though, it's a very good combination of Pokemon, just because this 2-mon core I have right here, they cover each other so well. I have an immediate balanced core between 2 Pokemon already, and it makes my life a lot easier considering I have not only my rocks, I have my good typing, a ground immunity, I have a grass resist, I have a fighting resist, and on top of that, it also gives me access to, again, momentum with U-turn. So I have a nice little pivoting core immediately right then and there with my first 2 picks, and it only cost me 27 points, and spoiler alert, this is actually going to be the most expensive Pokemon I get in this entire draft. Then from here though, I needed to get a bit more versatility, because one of the main things that will hinder Moltres is the inability to run anything other than boots because of its force resistance to Stealth Rock. The main thing I wanted to do with my next pick was to ensure I had a means of getting rid of hazards or keeping him off my field as best as possible for as long as possible, which explains my round 3 pick, Hatterene. A bit of a reach there, 11 points for a round 3 Pokemon, but again, value comes first in my estimation. What Hatterene gives me: Psychic type, Fairy type, Magic Bounce. So the inability to have my Pokemon, to deal with hazards right then and there with Magic Bounce, so it allows me a bit more freer with Moltres, be a bit more riskier if I don't want to run boots in certain matchups. Hatterene does have the ability to bounce back most hazards by itself thanks to Magic Bounce because of the fantastic ability. On top of that, a hard-hitting Psychic and Fairy type. It gives me another potential setup mon with Calm Mind. It gives me Trick Room support, so I can be a standalone Trick Room late game sweeper. And of course, it also gives me Healing Wish support and slow momentum with Baton Pass. Can't say no to slow momentum. I feel like it's one of the most underappreciated things in Draft League format, especially considering how offensive the meta game has become already in Generation 9, so I feel like having slow pivoting is always going to be imperative in any matchup or in any draft as far as I'm concerned. But again, Hatterene is a fantastic Pokemon for this draft, and really happy to have it on my team. Then we get to the more interesting part of my draft. Yes, it's only round 4, but I would have had some context here just so people don't get on the league and then be like, how the heck did you let this happen? So before I made this pick, I went to Owen, I asked him, can I pick this Pokemon? And the reason I'm saying this now is this Pokemon is going to be my Terra Captain. And the reason why I asked is, it was allowed to be a Terra Captain, and I thought, this can't be right. Why is this Mon a Terra Captain? It seems a bit too overpowered to be a Terra Captain. And Owen simply said to me, if it doesn't have an asterisk next to it saying it can't Terra, you can Terra it. So with that confirmation in mind, and please do not flame Owen, for love of God, don't. And don't be surprised at me for saying this, because I did get confirmation. My round 4 pick and my Terra Captain for this team is Venomoth. Awkward, yes. I really don't know what to make of this pick. But basically, the one thing I definitely want to have on this draft was something that can tie the whole team together, or basically benefit from what I already have in the first 3 rounds. You look at Venomoth on a whole, from a low tier perspective, it's a great Quiver Dancer, similar akin to Volcarona in a sense, but the best thing about it, aside putting Terra aside on Venomoth, is its dual stab is resisted by steel types. I have a Swampert and a Moltres to deal with steel types. Resisted by bug and poison, resisted by poison types. Swampert deals with poison types. So yeah, the support definitely came up a lot better than I expected. Plus on top of that, Hatterene with Magic Bounce support to support Venomoth, which is Stealth Rock weak pre-Terra. Fantastic option here, especially considering not only Terra but Quiver Dance in conjunction with Tinted Lens can make anything overpowered and busted. I was just fortunate enough to have Terra Venomoth, especially for a low price of 8 points. But for the most part, it's a devastating sub sweeper in the right hands. Hopefully I am the right hands to put in the use with Venomoth. But regardless, considering the team composition, Venomoth just fit the team so nicely. Aside from giving me a potential win con, aside from Hatterene, I also get a grounded poison type, so I don't have to worry about toxic spikes. I could set up toxic spikes myself if I so choose to. But for the most part, this thing will probably Quiver Dance to victory. That would be the main idea behind this draft with Venomoth. But regardless, Venomoth is going to be my Terra Captain for the season. Really excited to try it out, especially in a free Terra format. And in conjunction with what I currently have, I cannot be happier to get this thing. Really nice Pokemon from a low tier perspective. And then for round number 5, again, this is more akin to basically having some speed. Currently, my fastest Pokemon is Moltres and Venomoth. I want to additionally get some speed with this draft. So, round 5, I got Lycanroc Midday. Maybe a stretch to get it a bit early for round 5, but again, I valued having my roles filled out. Lycanroc Midday, base 112 speed, more importantly, priority with Accelerock. I didn't have priority on my draft, wanted to make sure I got that initially before I went anywhere else. The other nice thing is, I have a Flying Revenge Killer. I have something that's going to be in the back, on deck, ready to revenge kill any other flying type Pokemon that comes my way and tries to deal with me. And it's also just nice in general for dealing with other potential setup sweepers that may have set up already. So yeah, really nice Pokemon to have. Also gives me another Stealth Rocker if I want to go a bit more hyper offense in nature. But being a fast, hard-hitting rock type Pokemon in a low tier setting, it's very nice to have for me, especially considering how much I respect the other flying type Pokemon that are running rampant in the low tier format, and having the ability to have something to revenge kill not only flying type Pokemon, but other sub sweepers in general, pick off weakened stuff, just seemed like a right idea for me to have and pick Lycanroc round 5. That's just basically my idea with this with this pick. Getting value, maybe a bit of a reach, but I wanted to make sure I had that priority and speed and get that quickly as possible before I moved on to fill out my other roles, and that's where Lycanroc Midday comes into play. Also benefits from the fact that I have such good momentum as it is between Swampert, Moltres, and Hatterene. Next up, round number 6, we have Hitmonchan. Again, maybe a bit of a stretch as far as I'm concerned, but the main thing with Hitmonchan is the fact that while Hatterene is good on its own with Magic Bounce, there will be situations where Hatterene cannot be on the field to bounce back hazards, so I want to have a failsafe in the back to have the chance to rapid spin away those hazards, and that's where Hitmonchan comes into play. It already has the buff in and of itself with the ability to not only rapid spin away hazards, it can Drain Punch with Iron Fist to get back some health, it can get access to knockoffs so it can hit those ghost types super effectively, it gets access to Swords Dance to boost its attack 2 stages, and it gives me additional priority with Mach Punch. So again, more value right then and there. I have my priority, I have rapid spin support, and for the most part, a strong hard-hitting fighting type Pokemon in conjunction with Iron Fist. Can't go wrong with that for Hitmonchan. Then, round number 7, getting some additional value for my team, we snagged up Frostlass with round 7 pick, getting myself immediate speed, well, more speed with 110, but more importantly, I have a ghost type, so I have a spin blocker, and on top of that, I also have spikes on my team, which also benefits my Venomoth for a late game sweep scenario. Even more so, I get access to Ice Shard, so even more priority. So 3 priority mons on this draft, other additional support access to stuff like Destiny Bond, Thunder Wave for paralysis support in general, and because it has base 80 attack and special attack, I don't need to run special with Shadow Ball and Ice Beam. I can be physical with Ice Shard and Poltergeist, or even Triple Axle, so that's also a really good boon to have with Frostlass. You don't really know if I'm going to be physical or special with Frostlass, but again, having a ghost type Pokemon that not only prevents my hazards from being spun away, but I can set them up even easier. And it's also a good option for a hyper offensive lead. It can also be running pretty bulky, which is good from a low tier perspective. It just makes things a lot easier for me, and I wanted to at the very least ensure I had some sort of spiker on this draft specifically to benefit my Venomoth in the late game. So with that is my Frostlass. Then we have our round 8 selection being Zoroark. So my team did not have a dark type Pokemon, and at the very least I wanted to have some additional speed on my draft. So we have Zoroark here, base 105 speed, give me a dark type Pokemon so I have that psychic immunity. More knockoff support is never a bad thing to have, when I now have 3 users of knockoff. A good revenge killer with Choice Scarf, more priority with Sucker Punch, Memento support for Venomoth, which is never a bad thing to have, and of course Elution's a pretty good ability with my team, considering I can disguise it as pretty much anything if the situation does come up, and I can just mess with my opponent's battle strategy in the long run. So never a bad thing to have, and of course it can be set up itself with either SD or Nasty Plot by itself. Whether that comes up or not is a bit of a mystery, but regardless, Zoroark is still a pretty good Pokemon to have, especially considering that offensive dark type Pokemon are pretty common in a sense, depending on what you end up with. But I feel like I got a good mid-tier pick with Zoroark, considering that round 8 felt like a good spot to snag it up. Then I need to fill out some more roles. So round 9, we have the Dunsparce making it onto the team. So not only do I have my normal type Pokemon, so I have a ghost immunity, but more importantly, it gives me another stealth rocker that's not Swampert or Lycanroc. And I thought that was pretty important to have to ease the pressure on Swampert being stealth rock every single week, or having Lycanroc be stealth rock for hyper offense. I can still do that, but I have a bit more support with the Dunsparce in the back. While the Dunsparce isn't my Terra Captain, it still functions very, very well regardless. Doesn't really need Terra as far as I'm concerned. Like, I need the normal typing here because my Ghost Resist is Zoroark, which is not the best. But regardless, gives me Stealth Rock support, it can be a setup sweeper with Coil or Calm Mind, has Roost for longevity, Glare support, so extra paralysis support for the rest of my team. But for the most part, it's still a very good Pokemon, a good Gloomon for this draft in particular, considering I wanted the additional Stealth Rock, I wanted an additional bulky Pokemon to take hits, and the Dunsparce being on the way to fighting is really, really nice for this draft, especially considering with the potential setup options at disposal, it can function pretty well on its own, so can't say no to that. Then I need to address some additional holes that I do not have on this draft. One of which is a water resist. My water resist is Swampert. That's not good. So with that, round 10, snagged up Appleton for 5 points, and Appleton provides me with a very needed water resist, being 4 times resistant to water. I have a grass type and a dragon type now, so I have not only a good, so not only do I have my water resist, I have my ground resist as well without relying so much on Moltres. Thick Fat is also a great ability to have to resist the fire and ice moves a little bit easier. But yeah, another nice Gloomon to have in conjunction with stuff like the Dunsparce. I might want to pull out some Ripen strategies, which I'll try to keep in the back for now. But Appleton does fit my team really, really well. Like I said, I need a water resist, I need a ground resist that wasn't Moltres. Appleton was the best Pokemon available that fit those roles for my team, and couldn't be happier to have it for the most part. Hopefully I could do some work with Appleton this season. And then with the very last pick in the draft, I ended up snagging Magneton, because as you saw, my team had no steel type specifically, and the list of steel types was dwindling pretty fast, and I knew for a fact that I was either one to get Magnezone or Magneton. Unfortunately, Magnezone got taken in an earlier round, so I settled for Magneton instead, which is fine, just because of the fact that it is a bit faster than Magnezone at base 70 speed, and for the most part, it does give me a Violite for some additional bulk. Magnet Pull to trap steel types isn't really going to come up that much for the most part, just because considering what I already have on this draft, I deal with steel type Pokemon so well as it is that the odds of me bringing Magnet Pull on Magneton is pretty low, all things considered. Which is great because I don't have to worry about being Magnet Pull. I can just easily be analytic and just fire off some powerful Volt Switches and Thunderbolts and Flash Cannons and whatnot. And covering for Magneton is pretty doggone easy considering that I deal with ground type Pokemon super well between Swampert and and Appleton. Fighting type Pokemon, obviously I have Hatterene and Moltres for flying super effective stab. And yeah. It's not a bad Pokemon on this sense because it gives me additional momentum with Volt Switch, and Analytic lets it hit things super, super hard. So, can't say no to that. And yeah, that is the draft. That is my official draft for the Low Tier Mayhem Season number 1. And as you can see on your right side, I ended up drafting this entire team using only 97 of my 110 points. And truth be told, another semi-mistake, so to speak. Basically, 110 points thought it was okay, but considering I was able to get a team like this, barely hitting triple digits in points, and I have these points left over, I'm honestly satisfied with how the team came out, all things considered. For the most part, though, I think the only real issue with my team, while I do have Appleton as my water resist, it's my only water resist. So I do have to keep that in mind. And just for clarification or a breakdown of my entire team from a chart standpoint over here. So yeah, so you can see my team here all nice and panned out on this draft prep doc. So basically, if you guys do not have access to a draft prep doc, or this one, if you guys want this one in particular, I will leave a link to this in the description down below, so you have the opportunity to copy your own draft doc and use that for any of your own draft leagues. So as you can see, you put your Pokemon and your points here, you adjust the budget of your draft league here, and of course the remaining one will just be the budget minus whatever you put, the sum of whatever you put here. And then of course you have the Pokemon, you put your Terra Captain or your Z Captain, whatever, if it's Nat Dex, whatever, and it will simplify and just pop out all these weaknesses, resistances, immunities, all that stuff. And you can see here that I have one Pokemon of every single typing on this team. This was not intentional. I did not mean to go into this draft and actually try to do this. It just so happened that the draft ended up being this way. And of course there are some other there are some roles here that are kind of missing. Like, it only says Zoroark here as a knockoff user, but I have 3 knockoff users. This is a bit of an outdated doc anyway. But the other nice thing about this draft is you have the ability to not only plan out any drafts for any of your future drafts like this one, or your standard draft, doesn't really matter, but you do have the ability to also put in your teams for whatever draft you have. Put your opponent's team here, you put the Terra Captains and all that. Yes, I'm giving a precursor to my next round for UNPL, but I'm just using it as an example. And of course, then you have the ability to look at your opponent's matchup on this matchup center tab, and you have the ability to do this for up to 10 leagues, I believe, if not more. I never had to go that far, but regardless, with the matchup center tab here, you have the ability to look at your matchup, look at your speed tiers. You have the similar type chart that I showed earlier in the Draft HQ tab, and then of course you have all your stats listed by speed. You have your speed tiers already done for you, and all that stuff. With max IVs, you can adjust this for max IVs or 0 IVs or anything in between. And then of course you have your nature to make it neutral or positive, and then just going down the list of listing hazards and all that stuff. So it's a very, very informative doc to have for any draft league player, new or experienced. As for the doc link itself, obviously you see that I'm using, this is not the updated version. I will link the updated version to this in the description. After you click this link, you won't be able to actually edit anything. What you have to do after you click the link, you have to go to File, and then you will click Make a Copy. You rename it into whatever you want, and then you click Make a Copy, and you will have access to your very own draft prep doc, where you can literally do everything you see here. Just type in the Pokemon and do all that stuff. So yeah, I would definitely leave a link to the description for this draft league doc in the description down below. If you guys don't have your own, be sure to check it out. This is not really an advertisement for this person in particular who made this or updated it, but this is just my way of, at the very least, having you guys having the ability to have your own draft doc and make your own prep a lot easier for you without having to go back and forth on Pokemon Calculator to see what the Pokemon speed tier is, or what this is week 2, or what that's week 2. Whatever makes your life easier, that's all I'm trying to do for the draft league community, not only for experienced draft league players, but mostly it's there for the newer players who are trying to just get information and get their feet wet. But yeah, with that being said, if the fan doc also is out by the time this video goes up, I will also leave a link to that in the description. In terms of making a copy for that and like doing your own draft league, low tier draft league, I'll have to see if we can make that work. But regardless though, with that being said, that's going to be it for this video. Really guys, hope you enjoyed my little breakdown of not only my team but low tier in general. This is definitely going to be a fun experience. This is my first low tier draft for Generation 9, so I'm definitely looking forward to trying this team out. I know I have a lot of threats on my team. I'm really looking forward to trying out Terra Venomoth, and hopefully that thing will put in a lot of work. But regardless, if you guys like the video, please show some love. Leave a like, drop a comment, click the subscribe button. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I can only do that without your support. Check out all the other coaches taking part in low tier mayhem, and this is going to be a good time for everybody. Be sure to keep on the lookout for week 1, which will be going out a week from this Saturday, a week from today. But be on the lookout for that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video regardless. Hope you guys are looking forward to week number 1 as much as I am, and I'll leave it at that. Until the next time, guys, this is Tone, signing off for now. Peace out.